I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliosprand, Bibliohowlers, and Bibliomancers. And of course, my new Bibliomancer, Michael S. I totally appreciate your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Petrik here. Today's video will be a book review, a spoiler-free book review for Legacy of the Brightwash by Krystle Matar. If you're active in the sub-hobbies fantasy community, if you've been reading a lot of sub-hobbies fantasy books, I think you will have heard about Legacy of the Brightwash by Krystle Matar. This is a very highly praised book, and I thought I would end up disliking this book based on the first quarter of it, but no. Evidently, I end up loving this one. Legacy of the Brightwash is the first book in the Tainted Dominion series by Krystle Matar. This is one of those books you keep on hearing great things about for years, for 2 years to be more precise, but somehow the universe just schemed to stop you from reading it. And well, I am the universe. I am responsible for my own delay in reading Legacy of the Brightwash. As someone who loves reading both traditionally published and sub-hobbies fantasy books equally, it is kinda crazy considering how often I hear great things about this book. It is kinda crazy that it took me this long to finally read Legacy of the Brightwash. And I am surprised by the result. In theory, I should not have liked this runner-up to SPFBO 7. But now that I have read and finished this book, if Legacy of the Brightwash actually won the competition, I will say it is well deserved. And I'm not saying that the winner did not deserve the win. I haven't read Reign and Ruin by J.D. Evans yet, and there is always the possibility that I might end up liking that book more than Legacy of the Brightwash. But I'm just saying that luck, as always, played a part into how Legacy of the Brightwash did not win the competition. Anyway, enough introduction. Based on my own reading experience, I will try to discuss why this book might or might not be for you. Follow the law and you will stay safe. But what if the law is wrong? There are many themes in this novel, but this is the biggest one. Tashue's faith in the law is beginning to crack. 3 years ago, Tashue stood by when the authority condemned his son to the brutality of the Rift for non-compliance. When Tashue's son refused to register as tainted, the laws had to be upheld. He had never doubted his job as a regulation officer before, but 3 years of watching your son wither away can break down even the strongest convictions. Then, a dead girl washed up on the bank of the Brightwash, tattooed and mutilated. Where had she come from? Who would tattoo a child? Was it the same person who killed her? Why was he the only one who cared? Will Tashue be able to stand against everything he thought he believed in to get the answers he's looking for? From this premise, it will be easy to tell this is a story where the bad guys are the one in charge of the law. This is not a rare plot occurrence. Countless stories have done this before, but still, Matar executed it so well. I assure you that Legacy of the Brightwash is many things. It is a murder mystery, it is a political fantasy, it is also sprinkled with magic, and romance covers many pages of the book. But more importantly, whether you consider this a grimdark novel or not, Legacy of the Brightwash is a heavily character-driven novel that depicts love, found family, passion, justice, and hope in an unforgiving world and system that is terrible and bleak. And all of this were big positives of the novel for me. Eventually, even the romance. I think many of you know that I am not a romance reader. So many of my favorite fantasy books or series do exhibit love, friendship, found family, justice, and hope, and more, as they are often essential elements in my criteria for incredible fantasy stories. But those with detailed sex scenes or many pages devoted to romance, well, let's just say that the majority of my favorite fantasy books doesn't fall into the romance genre. I assume many of us, male fantasy readers and myself included when I speak about this, do not tend to consider heavy romance as our preference of escapism in our fantasy books. And personally speaking, based on my own experience, I found many romance in epic fantasy infuriating, not in a good way, or well, let's just say that they are not well written. However, I think many fantasy readers, including us who don't tend to like reading romance in epic fantasy, agree that we do want and need to love or be loved in the real world. Loneliness can be a slow death, but to love, be loved, and cherish each other can be a cure for loneliness. It is, in my opinion, one of the best strengths and invisible treasures we can have as a human being. And the two main characters in Legacy of the Brightwash, Tashue and Stella, exemplary displayed these needs in humanity. That, from my perspective, is the biggest strength of Legacy of the Brightwash. Not the romance per se, but the characterizations, their development, and the dialogues. Don't get me wrong here, I still don't click with the many pages of detailed sex scenes, 3 detailed sex scenes to be more precise. If it were up to me, I would decrease the page count for them out of the novel. But again, this is just my preference. I am not the author, and many readers do like reading the detailed sex scenes. And it also took me about a quarter of the book until I felt fully invested with the novel. It's not until we reach the fine dining scene, those who have read Legacy of the Brightwash will know which scene I'm talking about. It's not until that scene that I felt fully invested with Legacy of the Brightwash. But I cannot dispute how bright the characters, their characterizations, and their developments wash over me. Tashue and Stella, the 2 main characters, are lonely, broken individuals with a lot of regret who found their love and need in each other. Their romance is slow burn and fought for by both of them and also the readers. Do not expect the fruition of their relationship to happen quickly, and you will be rewarded. And this is just one example. I think the first quarter of Legacy of the Brightwash was a getting used to section. There were many characters and names introduced here. But rest assured that they are all there for good reasons. I constantly grew to care about the characters more and more as I read through the book. Legacy of the Brightwash utilized multiple point of view chapters, but Tashue certainly dominated the narrative. He understandably has the most POV chapters and page count. And I like Tashue. I have a soft spot for characters doing the best they can to redeem themselves, and Tashue embodied this. Regardless of the myriad of mistakes he made in the past and still do in the present time frame, he never ceases to give up on undoing the damages he caused. The odds are always against Tashue and the protagonist, but despite his fury and frustration with his circumstances, Tashue still tries everything to give his affection and understanding to Stella and Caritwen, patch things up with Jason, and I like reading his friendship with Rodrishi and Kazrani. It is worth noting that the entire story in this book takes place in the city of Yaelsmuir, and this novel has been marketed and reviewed by many readers as a grim dark fantasy novel. Although I do not consider this a totally grimdark fantasy, as I felt the tone of the narrative did not feel all-consumingly reflect that, and the main characters are relatively kind-hearted people put in desperate situations. But my god, as the premise mentioned, with children being mutilated and killed, this is indeed a dark story. But here is what I love most about Legacy of the Brightwash. In addition to the characterizations, hope and courage against overwhelming odds. This is not an overwhelmingly dark novel, in my opinion, and to battle against the darkness, Matar magnificently includes beautiful and soothing moments related to friendship, found family, and parenthood as a contrast and beacon of light in the narrative. And I definitely embrace those moments amid all the unraveling chaos and tension. I try not to judge people for what I see in their vulnerable moments. We have all faced dark days, and I've yet to meet someone who always made the right choice. That change is not something to be ashamed of, and it's not something you should resist. You cannot be the same woman you were when you woke up in the morning, but it is alright to exist as this new woman, cracked by your rough handling, but still alive. So at the end of the day, it is not a surprise why Legacy of the Brightwash garnered so much positive receptions in the self-published fantasy community for the past 2 years. Even though Matar's debut novel contains elements that aren't my preference of reading in epic fantasy, like detailed sex scenes, I just found them usually boring, and a heavier focus on romance. I cannot deny that they were well written. I did not skip any of those scenes as I did in Dark Dawn by Krystle, for example. The relationship between the main characters just won me over. So if you love a slow burn murder mystery and political fantasy with superbly written, flawed characters, even more so if you like reading romance in your fantasy books, make sure to pick up Legacy of the Brightwash by Krystle Matar. And not gonna lie, I'm glad that I waited this long before I read Legacy of the Brightwash, because the ending of this one is a mean cliffhanger. Fortunately for me, the sequel, Legacy of Brick and Bone, will be published next month. So this means that I don't have to wait long to find out the continuation to this character story. And I certainly look forward to reading Legacy of Brick and Bone as soon as possible. And also, as a side note before I close this review, there is a character named Petrik here, But this is all purely coincidence, as noted by the author. This is not based on me, even though it is written in the same name as me. So yeah, that's pretty much my review for Legacy of the Brightwash. I consider this book a pleasant surprise for me, and I look forward to reading the sequel as soon as possible. If you have read Legacy of the Brightwash, let me know what you think about it. And if you haven't, do you plan to pick up this book someday? So yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.